Senator from Iowa.
The past few months have resulted in some dramatic changes in our daily lives. We all know it's because of the virus pandemic. But for America's farmers and the 86,000 Iowa family farms, there were still crops to be planted, fields to be fertilized, and livestock to care for, regardless of the virus pandemic. These family farms take great satisfaction in the fact that they're part of the most affordable, abundant, and safe supply of food of any country in the world. They are also proud to help fuel the country, knowing that almost every gallon of gas consumed in the United States is blended with renewable fuels. Family farmers have a lot to be proud of. And as one of two farmers serving in the United States Senate, I can speak to that because I am one. One of the most enjoyable aspects of my job is the opportunity to speak with farmers across the state during my annual 99 county meetings. Being able to hear from them directly and to use my position on the Senate Agriculture Committee to work on their issues is an honor and a privilege that I don't take lightly. At my meetings, farmers will introduce themselves by telling me how many generations of their families have made their living on the same land that they now operate. Third, fourth, and fifth generation farmers using the same soil and oftentimes the same tools and barns as generations before them. In fact, the Iowa Department of Agriculture's Century Farm database shows that out of these 86,000 family farmers in Iowa, 20,060 farms in our state that have been in the same family for more than 100 years. Even more impressive, out of that 86,000 family farmers, we have a classification called the Heritage Farm Database showing 1,360 farms have been in the same family for 150 years. Farming isn't just a profession. It isn't just a hobby or a personal passion. Farming is how many Iowans leave their mark in our world. The legacy of many Iowa families is built and created around life at that farm. And every farmer intends to leave their land to their children better than they found it when it was entrusted to them for their care in the first place. Farmers live by that creed, and it's reflected by the fact that Iowa is a global leader in sustainable farming practices. Through Farm Bill programs at the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the federal government has proven it can successfully partner with farmers to enhance conservation practices. At the state level, Governor Reynolds and Iowa Agriculture Secretary Naig are leading the charge to implement the Iowa Nutrient Reduction Strategy, our way of cleaning up the rivers and helping the Gulf of Mexico not be as dead as it is so often. This includes techniques like no-till, cover crops, wetland restoration to improve soil health and enhance water quality. Researchers at Iowa State University continue to develop new conservation techniques like adding tall grass prairie strips to fields and modeling when to best apply fertilizer. Iowa farmers have embraced voluntary stewardship investments and practices that allow them to stay productive and to be profitable. Maybe not so profitable now when corn is at less than $3 a bushel, as an example, but overall time profitability. They do this while also ensuring their land can be productive for years to come. For when it's time to give their children a chance to take over the farm. So while the federal government has shown an ability to partner with the Iowa farmers, there are also times when the federal government has overstepped its authority and attempted to regulate private landowners with one-size-fits-all solutions. For example, in 2010, the USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service, or it goes by NRCS in most states, they determined that an Illinois farmer by the name of Kurt Wilkie and his family could not maintain and farm their land. Now, this was 2010. Today's 2020. We might have a resolution of this finally. The USDA claimed the land contained wetlands, despite documentation to the contrary. So in early 2011, Mr. Wilkie started making improvements to his drainage tile system on that farm. That's when the NRCS got involved. And for him, it was a terrible life for the next several years. They told him to stop the work. In other words, stop improving your land through the drainage tile system. And they warned him that he was putting farm program payments at risk. Earlier this month, after nearly a decade of court battles, the NRCS, Farmer Wilkie was fighting the NRCS in court battles. So after a decade, a determination by the director of the USDA's National Appeals Division reprimanded this NRCS agency for overstepping its grounds. Can you imagine stepping in to say that a farmer can't farm his farm? And the USDA stepped in because they had failed to obey their own rules, and the appeals division favored Mr. Wilkie. This protected court battle should have been avoided. And in regard to that, Madam President, I'm going to read and then I'm going to ask unanimous consent to put this in the record from the Iowa Farm Bureau Federation newspaper called The Spokesman. This started in 2010. Now, so 2020, this finally ends, maybe in a way where one division of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, called the National Appeals Division, because of their decision, Mr. Wilkie will have an opportunity to be reimbursed for tens of thousands of dollars of legal fees incurred while fighting for fair treatment. I ask unanimous consent.
Without objection.
So he finally gets justice. But just think the life of Mr. Wilkie for the 10 years that the U.S. Department of Agriculture and that agency said he could not farm his land the way he wanted to and put in the tile system the way he wanted to. Maybe sometimes their opinion's justified, but you can see how they overstepped their bounds and how it hurt this farmer. I want to give you another example of government overreach. Was the Obama-era regulations called WOTUS of the United States, WOTUS, so most of you people know that as WOTUS, or WOTUS. The 2015 WOTUS rule was a dramatic expansion of the authority that Congress provided to the Environmental Protection Agency to regulate the navigable waters of the United States. Remember, navigable waters? It's supposed to be the definition as far as the big boats can go up a river. That's federal regulation. Beyond that, it's state regulation. But not for that previous administration and WOTUS. They're going to regulate the road ditches, as an example. In fact, the Obama-era rule would have claimed jurisdiction to require federal permission to do any number of activities, not just or near Iowa rivers and streams, but on 97% of Iowa's land. To clear up a common confusion, this rule wasn't about regulating discharge of pollutions into the waterways, which is important and is done through other parts of the Clean Water Act. It is also what this whole WOTUS rule was about, was requiring federal red tape for routine land use decisions with little or no environmental benefit. It was a power grab, pure and simple. 1 week ago today, the Trump administration's WOTUS rule went into effect. This rule balances the need to protect our navigable rivers while also protecting the private property rights of business, homeowners, and of course, family farmers. This is a major accomplishment, and I congratulate President Trump and Administrator Wheeler for getting this rule over the finish line. And I hope people will remember 4 months from now, when they go to the, particularly people that are farmers, remember what WOTUS would have done for you if it had been kept in place. You would have maybe had to get a permit from the government to do normal farming operations. Now you don't have to. You never have had to in 150, 160 years in Iowa. For the time being, these 2 examples of government overreach have been resolved. However, the United States Congress and the executive branch must continue to advocate for fairness and common sense when passing legislation or regulations that will impact private landowners. Farmers understand the importance of environmental rules, and farmers will follow those rules. However, we must demand fair enforcement of those rules so that they don't disadvantage family farmers like Mr. Wilkie of Illinois was disadvantaged for 10 years fighting the bureaucracy. However, we must demand fair enforcement of these rules so that they don't disadvantage anybody for that matter. The virus pandemic that we're in has demonstrated the importance of supporting farmers and ensuring that we have stable, safe, and affordable food supply for our country. Through natural disasters, through droughts, through pests, through pandemics, Americans' families are still farming. Let's make sure that the federal government doesn't get in their way so that they can pass along their legacy and their farm to future generations. I yield.